Hey people, Shinobi no Kami here. In this fanfic after the Kyuubi attack, Naruto was adopted by Kakashi Hatake, an ex-Anbu captain and a student of Naruto's father Minato. How will this change the little Naruto's life? Will he be spared from the villagers' hatred or will things be the same as in the original timeline? Watch to know. Before we begin, please use the like button and share the video if you enjoyed it. Leave your thoughts in the comments section. Now, let's roll the intro. Chapter 6, Tsunade. Are you sure this time that she's here? Naruto asked, nearly groaning out the question. This had been the third possible lead so far, and at this rate he was wondering if they would get home by his birthday. Although it was cool learning the Rasengan and all, but he was missing home, and Hinata too, plus he wasn't sure when Jiraiya was being serious or not. Sometimes he would just disappear, and when he got back he sometimes smelled of alcohol and perfume. I'm pretty sure this time, Jiraiya told the young blonde. Last village said she ran out of credit and told me she was seen coming this way. Plus this town has a lot of gambling buildings as well. Although it did take him paying off her department, honestly how the hell was it possible for someone to rank up that much in gambling? It was a good thing his books sold well in all known countries, or else he would never have been able to pay that kind of money off with just his ninja pay. Again, how the hell she racked up such department for years and people still let her into gamble knowing she might skip out on them, he had no idea. At any rate he had a good feelings about this place. It was far from the village and yet just close to the border of the country. It also had lots of gambling houses of various types, one that she hadn't been to in years. Most likely she hadn't come back to this place this long to let any previous debts she had to be long forgotten about. After all, given all the years she had been traveling, she was bound to run into the same town at least twice. So what does she look like again? Naruto asked. Jiraiya sighed. Didn't I already say what she looked like? Well, all you said was that she looked young, with blonde hair and something about a chest you couldn't miss. Jiraiya grinned at that last line. He had to admit there were many features that he remembered about her, but everyone came back to that point. Sakura scowled at the pervert. In the time she had been with him she had learned quickly that there was a reason why Naruto referred to him only as Ero Senin all this time. She could see that Sasuke wasn't enjoying this either. Why don't you kids get a hotel ready over there? He pointed to a random one. I'm going to take a quick look around and scout the place out a bit, the man said before leaving them to it. The three genins sighed in unison as they were left with the task. We might as well get this over with, Sasuke said, putting his hands in his pockets, mainly to try and take it easy on his hands. They were still bandaged up from the last training he had, but he was close to getting it down. Just a little more and he felt he might finally get the control he needed. After that, he would work on different ways to use this new lightning techniques. He already planned to use it with his sword, but he was also thinking of smaller things like shurikens and kunai. He was wondering if he could learn to put it into paper bombs, making giant electrical explosions instead of the normal ones. It opened up a whole new world of tactics and he would need them. Sasuke cast a look to his teammates. In the month they had been gone they all had been improving. Naruto was quickly on his way to perfecting that Rasengan move. Even Sasuke had to admit that what he had seen, that jutsu would be one hell of an attack when landed. But after learning about Naruto's past he couldn't begrudge him learning it. This was something that was being passed on, that his biological father created. It was still odd to think that Kakashi wasn't Naruto's father, but that didn't matter. Naruto had lost a family he had never known, so for Sasuke, who still had memories of his family, this was one of the few things Naruto had of them. Looking at Sakura he couldn't help how much she had grown. In the academy she had been about average, maybe slightly above, but after joining Team 7 she had grown. After that training month she had grown even more. She seemed more mature lately, no longer bugging him for dates, although they did have an agreement about that, but now she seemed to really be taking the ninja life more seriously. Plus she had gotten stronger too. He couldn't help but start to think of her in a new light lately. Maybe he should rethink a few other things about her as well. She was a good friend, one of the few that he could say was a friend, a comrade, but, well, he wasn't sure. Maybe she was more, he wasn't sure. He pushed those thoughts aside for now as they entered the hotel. Little did anyone know that just outside of the village 2 figures in robes walked into view of the village. They had been traveling for a while now and were nearing their target. The information was correct about this place. The taller of the 2 asked. The companion nodded. Yes, we should find them here. Ah, good, it will be nice to see if we can finish all the objectives in one go. Not much later, a woman in a dark kimono walked the streets of the city. She had an earthly beauty about her. She wouldn't turn heads, but she was an attractive woman in her late 20s. She had dark eyes with short hair but long bangs as well. With her was a small female pig that wore of all things a small red vest and a pearl necklace. This was Shizune, the apprentice of Tsunade, and currently the woman was looking a little worn out. They had been kicked out of their old hotel because Tsunade took the money for the next 2 days to gamble. Now Shizune was looking for a slightly cheaper place. It wasn't the first time that her master had that feeling of a sure thing, and gambled away on it. But it was hard on Shizune, who had to deal with her master's fallout. Although she wouldn't trade her life with Tsunade away for anything, at times she secretly wished her master would return home. She missed the Leaf Village, she missed the forests, the mountain, the villagers, everything at times. Sometimes she wondered if Tsunade felt the same, but the woman was anything but stubborn. Shizune sighed as she picked a hotel that looked like it was in their new price range. Although she knew that Tsunade had been only running away from her problems, Shizune had to be there for her. If she wasn't, then Tsunade would be all alone, and she did love the woman as though she were family. If her uncle Dan hadn't died, Tsunade might have married and become her aunt after all. So despite all the hardships, she would be there for her. Besides, it wasn't all bad and she had learned so much under Tsunade's tutelage. Walking into the hotel, she noticed 3 young children looking like they were making reservations. At first she thought it strange that kids were alone, then she quickly noticed the ninja gear they had on. Genin, but we rice there sensei. Please don't tell me that there sensei left them alone. Shizune looked around but didn't see anyone that could be their team leader. They were an odd sort, a pink-haired girl, which was a rare hair color. Thinking back, she could remember seeing a village woman with that hair before in the Leaf, but she couldn't place where, in red clothing and ninja mesh. A blonde, also a bit rare hair color, in a mix of black and orange of all things. The last person was dressed all in black with short dark hair. I can't believe Ero Sennin took off like that, the blonde spoke up. Not the first time he's done this, the dark-haired one crossed his arms. Should we go and find them? The only female of the group asked them. Both boys blushed bright red suddenly at that. Hell no, both said at the same time. The girl narrowed her eyes and placed her hands on her hips. Where did you guys find him last time? Every time it's brought up you blush like this. Was it one of those places again? Shizune had no idea who they were talking about, but by the sounds of it, she was getting a sinking feeling that whoever it was, he was doing things that she and Tsunade wouldn't approve of. I can't believe you dragged me into such a place, the dark boy glared at the other. It's not my fault, the blonde said in defense. I didn't know what kind of place that was. Besides, I got a girlfriend, why the hell would I want to go to a place like that? And you better not say anything to Hinata-chan, I don't want her to get the wrong idea about me. The pink one sighed, muttering something about it had been one of those places after all. Shizune did notice something else. They had on leaf symbols on them. It was nice to see fellow leaf ninja even if they were genins that she didn't know. But she couldn't just go over and say hello. After all, Tsunade didn't like to attract attention from anyone from the village. So she watched the 3 argue about whose fault had been what when she felt a presence behind her. She was about to react when a familiar voice caused her to freeze up. Long time no see, Shizune, Jiraiya spoke up. Her head whipped around so fast she nearly caused an injury in her neck. Looking up, she saw the Toad Sanin himself. Jiraiya-sama. Hey Ero Sennin. The blonde yelled out, and now a few things were clicking into Shizune's head about the earlier conversation. I thought we were looking for a blonde woman, so you better not be trying to pick her up. Blonde woman. Shizune looked back to Jiraiya and saw the serious expression on his face. They were here looking for Tsunade, there was no other explanation. Jiraiya nodded as though reading her mind. She's being called home Shizune, this is an official order that even she can't ignore. Please take us to her. Shizune was a bit torn, she was loyal to Tsunade but on the other hand she was a Leaf Village. If this was an official order she had to help if she could. Jiraiya placed a calming hand on her shoulder and gave her an assuring smile, don't worry I just want to talk and hope she sees reason. He noticed the pained look she was giving him and he knew that it was a long shot about that. Still, he had to try at least and just maybe his little ace up the sleeve might work if all else failed. So who is this person anyway? Sasuke asked him. You act like she knows exactly where Tsunade is. She does, he explained to the genins. You see this is Shizune, apprentice to Tsunade and pretty much goes wherever she goes. She's also a great medical ninja from what I heard too. Shizune looked at the three young faces and she had to figure that Jiraiya wouldn't leave her alone until she led them all to Tsunade. Still if there was hope to help bring her master home maybe she should bring them to her. Shizune just hoped that Tsunade wouldn't be too angry with her because of it. She bowed to the three of them as introductions were made. Now a few things started to click in her head. Sakura's last name of Haruno reminded her of an older woman that was a merchant in the village. Shizune remembered that woman because pink hair was hard to forget, plus the shop always had nice things in it. The dark-haired boy was the famed last Uchiha. But the blonde when he said he was Naruto Hatake that was odd. Wait, Hatake, I knew a Kakashi Hatake in the academy, Shizune remembered the masked boy genius. He had been pretty cold and distant with others. He had also been the star of the class and had been someone that most girls had had crushes on. Yeah that's my dad. Since when did Kakashi get married? Shizune remembered that a girl named Rin had been interested but last she heard before she left the village that girl had gone on a mission and didn't come back. He didn't. Hey did you know my dad or something? Naruto asked her honestly interested to hear this. Oh well, only in passing, Shizune told him a little nervously. I was in his class in the academy and I remember seeing him around. We also met up a few times in the last war. Wait what do you mean he didn't marry? It's kind of a long story. Naruto scratched the back of his head, although he is dating Aunt Anko. Shizune blinked. As far as she knew Kakashi had no other family, was this aunt from the mother's side of the family. Just how much had she missed out on in all these years away from the village at this point? As much as this is interesting, Jiraiya interrupted before this took all day. We really should get going before it gets too late in the day. Sakura looked up at the older man. Why? Will she leave town? No I'm afraid that she might get to start drinking and then she'll be a handful. The man sighed as he saw Shizune wince slightly. The woman knew all too well how bad Tsunade could get at times when she had too much to drink. Shizune wondered if Tsunade drank to forget or just drank so she had an excuse to act out. Maybe it was a bit of both or maybe this was just her way of trying to bury the pain of her past. The group soon left the hotel as Shizune still had to make a room and even if this didn't work out she didn't want to walk all over the village some more to find yet another hotel in their range. So after leaving everything in the room and leaving Taunton to the room as the little pig made it known she wanted to rest up. They all made their way to the bar that Tsunade said to meet her at. As they walked in both Shizune and Jiraiya took notice of Tsunade right away. It was hard to miss the woman who was alone in a booth having starting to drink already. It was also easy for her to stand out. There weren't many beautiful-looking young 20-year-olds with blonde hair in a gray shirt that showed off some of the most impressive cleavage in the known lands. Oh. Now I get it, Naruto commented seeing her. Wait she's supposed to be the same age as you. He looked at Jiraiya. Like I said she's got a henge on herself all the time, he explained to them as they walked over. He could tell that Shizune was nervous after all he knew that Tsunade would not be pleased with the news. Well he might as well make himself a target for Tsunade's anger as repayment for leading them to her. Not like he most likely wouldn't have made her angry eventually anyway. Hey there long time no see, Jiraiya smiled broadly as he quickly sat down and placed an arm around her shoulder. She had been so absorbed in her own thoughts she hadn't even noticed him. Then again he usually knew how to surprise her. Jiraiya, the single word out of her mouth was full of ice and malice that it would make most men immediately pull away. Well Jiraiya was used to it so he was mostly immune by this point, mostly. Now, don't get like that, I'm here to visit you and I got mail from sensei for you as well. He joked. Tsunade glared at him for a moment, remove the arm or I will, surgically. Jiraiya did it although he knew she couldn't do that to him, not after the trauma of the war she couldn't stand the sight of blood anymore. However she could and would, break his arm in so many places that only she could put it back together again. So he complied with her as everyone else gathered around. Tsunade noticed the kids and for a moment paused as she looked at them and quickly back to him. The hell is this? I thought that you said you would never teach a genin team again, plus weren't you always away from the village too? Teach. They're just on loan. Hey, Naruto shouted out. But they got some hidden talents, the man grinned at them. A little rough but I've worked with worse. Tsunade shook her head, I never thought you wanted to teach again, in fact I remember you saying as much. That had been when they had last met up a few years ago. She remembered how they ran into each other randomly, they did the usual, they argued, he was a pervert and they ended up drinking and talking about old times again. That night had been a little hazy but she did remember him saying how he would never teach again. That he was tired of his students all dying on him. That was one of the few times she felt for the man, he had lost every single student he had. She knew that a couple of them had been really special for Jiraiya, she could see their deaths hit him hard. So that fact he had another genin team with him was slightly confusing for her. His response was just a shrug, what can I say, there is just something about them. Plus I was wrong, just because you say something doesn't mean that you were right at the time. Besides this might be my last chance to see something interesting grow in the process. Apparently their sensei said that these kids would replace our old team on day. Tsunade took one look and burst out laughing, leaving 3 very glaring genins at her. These 3 to replace the Sannin. I know that Orochimaru is no longer around but still, this is ridiculous. She told him after finally stopping her laughter. So why are you here then? I know it's not just coincidence that you're here. Jiraiya got a much more serious look on his face as he pulled out a scroll that he carried with him. He placed it on the table so she could see the seal of the Hokage. Tsunade paused in her drink as she saw the seal and quickly drank it down. She glared at the offending piece of paper like it had personally insulted her. You're to come home now, Jiraiya explained just in case. He wasn't sure how much she had to drink but he wanted to be sure she got the full meaning while she was still lucid. This is an official order Tsunade, you can't ignore this. Like hell, she muttered. I said I never wanted to go back. Yeah, and the old man gave you permission because of his position. Jiraiya knew that if it had been anyone else the Hokage wouldn't have been as lenient on someone else. Sensei wants you to come home now, in fact he could use your help as he got banged up pretty bad. A few people could use your skills. You know I don't do that work anymore, a shadow fell over her face. Ever since that rainy day she couldn't stand the sight of blood anymore. The image of Dan's body, his blood covering the grass as well as her hands, the blood of the man she loved. She just couldn't do it anymore. Surgery for people became impossible for her. She hated it, she hated that she had spent so much of her life to save lives and now she can't even do that anymore. The fact that she had lost her brother and lover as well as her skills as a medic had just been too much. After the war had ended she had left and never looked back. Now here was her idiot teammate with orders calling her back. She looked at the scroll as she tried to figure out her options. This was an official order so if the Hokage was calling her back then he wouldn't stand for it if she just ignored it. That was most likely why Jiraiya was here. Not only was he the only one that could track her down quickly but was one of the few that could take her in a fight. Anyone else and she would just flatten them and send them back for medical healing. So if she said no she would have to fight him. The genins weren't an issue, Shizune could handle them after all it was Jiraiya that was the problem. So, if she got past him then what? She had stayed in this country because it offered protection. She still had entries in the bingo books of the major ninja countries. If she got caught in one of those she might end up being hunted. If the Leaf thought it best to send in teams to a neutral or worse, a hostile country it could trigger a major incident. If she went to one of the smaller or lesser known countries she might be able to disappear a lot easier but not much room to run. Maybe he was only calling her back for a short time. She could take that at least if they just needed her expertise. So what exactly am I being called back for? She asked him hoping it was just medical that she could instruct Shizune to do anything requiring surgery. Jiraiya paused knowing full well she was going to hate this part. You're going to be the next Hokage. Tsunade's eyes widened as she stared at him like he said that the dead were rising. For a moment she thought that she had heard him wrong, her as Hokage. He had to be kidding her, there was no way in hell she was going to take that position, and he had to know that and to know why she would never want to be Hokage. That better be a joke, she growled out at him. It's no joke. Why the hell would I want that fool's job? That job does nothing but get people killed, there is no way in hell that I would take that job. Get some other sucker to do it. Jiraiya knew this wasn't going to be easy, in fact this was going as well as he thought it was. He was just about to try another tactic when he noticed Naruto. The boy looked extremely pissed at the moment, and from the looks of it, the boy was going to blow. Before he could calm the boy down or stop him before he said or did something stupid, he was too late. What the hell is your problems, Granny? Naruto shouted out as everyone at the table froze. There was a long pause at the table before Tsunade glared angrily at Naruto as a tick slowly grew on her temple. What did you just call me? The cold in her voice gave Jiraiya chills. He hadn't heard her use that tone in her voice in a long time. In fact, the last time had been when she had caught him peeking at her in the hot springs. He had nearly been killed by her that day. You heard me. Naruto stood up glaring at her. You only look young because of a henge, I know you're really old. What kind of woman hides her age like that anyway? You little brat. And what's wrong with being Hokage? That job is only for people who want to get killed, Tsunade told him. With the exception of everyone's whose face in on that mountain, they've all died, and do you know how many people have died trying to even get that position? She calmed down a bit, taking the last drink in her cup. Only fools and idiots want that job, and it will eventually kill everyone that takes it. Well, you can count me as both then. Naruto shot back, not noticing the sweat drop of his three companions at his choice of words. Because one day, I'm going to be Hokage. For a split second the image of Naruto was overlapped with the image of another young boy. The image was of her young brother Naoki. He had made that same claim in that same way. She was shocked to her core as this boy reminded her too much of him. The look in the boy's eyes said he truly believed that dream of his. She snapped out of her shock as she smirked at him. Oh, you think some loud-mouthed little brat like you has what it takes to be Hokage? You have no idea what it takes. I know that it takes more than being an old has-been, running away from everything and nothing but a drunk. A sudden smash was heard as Tsunade had crushed the sake jug she had been holding. Everyone could feel the anger coming off the woman. How dare you? You have no idea what I've put myself through and lost all in the service of my village. You haven't had to put people back together, seen more people die than you can remember, you haven't seen your loved ones die or dead in front of you. I did my service and more. I have nothing left to give, and you expect me to go back and lead the village that I gave so much of my life to. My grandfather and great-uncle were the first and second Hokages, and you know what? They both died violent deaths. I barely remember them anymore since they died so young. The only thing left of them is this. She pulled out a necklace with a small green stone of some kind on it. This is worth enough to buy a mountain and something they gave me. It's something they both wore at one time, and now it's a constant reminder that all Hokages come to a bad end. I may not be as old as you and did as much, Naruto came back at this point. But you're not the only person that's lost something. But you know what, I don't care. I'm not going to let anything stop me from being Hokage, because the Hokage protects the village and keeps it safe. You may not love the village, but I do, and I will do anything to protect it. If I die to protect it, then fine. You stupid brat, don't you dare say something like that in front of me. Tsunade yelled at him. You want to waste your life for a dream you'll never see happen. At least I'm going for something instead of hiding like you. Shouldn't we stop this? Shizune asked Jiraiya, getting a little scared of how this was going. Let it play out. The man hadn't seen anyone get under Tsunade's skin like this before. It was actually kind of funny, although he hoped she didn't pound him into the ground. Bringing back Kakashi's kid all broken up would not be a good thing to happen. That's it, you really think you can be Hokage? Then fine, let's see how strong you think you are then. Tsunade got up and headed for the door. That is if you're not scared. Like hell I would be scared of you, grandma. Cracking knuckles could be heard from Tsunade, making a fist at that remark. Soon the entire group was outside in the street as Naruto and Tsunade faced off against each other. Naruto took out a kunai getting ready, but was a little confused by how she seemed very relaxed. Well, aren't you going to do something? Like I have to worry about you, I won't need more than a finger to deal with you. She replied confidently. Naruto narrowed his eyes, he hated it when people looked down at him. He rushed forward with his kunai, but every time she slashed at her she dodged it easily. She only moved when she had to, and every time it just barely missed. But she was smiling the entire time. Naruto soon saw that she was doing it on purpose to prove a point. He tried to go faster, but the next thing he knew, her finger had gone through the hole in the hilt of the kunai and it was literally taken out of his hand. He had never even heard of someone doing that before. He quickly pulled out his short sword belonging to his grandfather and tried attacking with that as the other looked on. Should we stop this before it gets dangerous? Sakura asked. Jiraiya shook his head watching the action. Don't worry, she'll make sure that she won't go overboard. Actually, I'm surprised he's lasting this long. But then again, I think she's playing with him. Sasuke had never seen anyone take on Naruto this easily before. In all the spars with him they had always been somewhat even. Sometimes Naruto would win and other times it was Sasuke, so seeing the boy he considered his friend and rival having such a hard time only made him see just how far someone could go as a ninja. The woman was strong, maybe even stronger than his brother. Naruto couldn't believe that this woman was holding him off so easily, just when he thought he got a good attack in she moved more quickly than he thought was possible. Next thing he knew she was in front of him, her fingers suddenly flicked his forehead. It felt like a hammer had hit his skull as he flew out 10 feet. He cursed as he picked himself up, that had really hurt and it had just been a finger. He needed something to beat her, something she couldn't block and a power move to get through her freakish strength. He wasn't sure if it was a good idea, he hadn't even perfected it yet, but it was the only hope he had. He put away his sword as she started to gather the chakra and ran at her. Jiraiya and the Genins were surprised he was going to try and use the Rasengan on her. Tsunade was a little confused what the boy was doing, but suddenly as the chakra started to form into a ball she knew full well what jutsu he was using. That old fool, teaching a kid that. She knew the Rasengan having seen it done herself by Jiraiya after he learned it from his student. The chakra was forming tighter now, she had to stop the kid before it was finished as there was no way in hell she was going to try and block that jutsu. Tsunade suddenly slammed her fist into the ground as it broke open slightly. Naruto hadn't expected that as his foot was tripped up and he fell, the jutsu fell apart without his concentration to keep it stable. Jiraiya, she yelled at her idiot teammate. What the hell do you think you were doing trying to teach a genin that jutsu? Huh, I did it. Naruto slowly picked himself up. Did what? Tsunade asked annoyed. He grinned under his mask at her. I got you to use your hold hand. She paused as she thought about it, admitting defeat that the kid had gotten her to use her hand and not just a finger like she said. Okay, so you got me there, but you're the one that was face down in the dirt. If I got that jutsu finished then you would have been the one in the dirt. I am surprised you got the jutsu that far, but there is no way in hell a boy like you could learn something like that. 1 week. Give me 1 week and I'll show you that I can do it. Tsunade raised her eyebrow as something started to click in her mind. Oh. Then how about this, you and I make a bet. Sure. Tsunade smirked, thinking she found a way out, or at least maybe get some time to think of a way to plan out her escape from being called back to be Hokage. If I win this bet and you can't master that jutsu in 1 week then you all leave me alone. Now wait a minute, Jiraiya started up but Naruto already jumped in. Fine, but if I win, you come back and become Hokage. Tsunade couldn't have planned this out better than she thought. There was no way in hell that boy could finish it in just a week. It took the 4th years to create it and it took Jiraiya months to learn it as well. This was just too perfect. You're on, kid. Wait a damn minute. Jiraiya jumped in. No take backs, Jiraiya, she smirked at him. Either we do this or I start running. Don't worry, I won't leave this town until after a week, but if you try anything I'm gone and you know I won't be easy to find or take back. Jiraiya knew she had a point, and although it was a slim hope it was hope, but still. Why the hell did the brat have to go and say something like that? He palmed his face thinking maybe taking the kid was a bad idea after all. Fine then. He then looked at the kid picking him up. You better learn this because there is no way in hell I'm telling the third about any of this if this blows up in our faces. Don't worry, I can do it, Naruto assured him. But Jiraiya wasn't as certain. True, he had come a long way, but he wasn't sure the kid could pull it off. This was going to be one very long week for all of them. Chapter 7. Hard Times. For the past few days the only thing on Naruto's mind was to complete the Rasengan. He had gone up to the second stage, but the third part he was having a hard time with. He was currently in an open field littered with small craters from his previous failed attempts. He knew that he could get this, but he was running out of time. For days he had been trying to get this right, but he couldn't get it. He had to compress it all down and also keep up the spinning chakra by pouring more power into it. Doing both at the same time was proving to be too much for him. He couldn't focus on both at the same time. Either he would lose focus on one of the two and the Rasengan would become unstable. Keeping both in balance was the key, but it was a lot harder than it sounded. Currently he was on his back looking up at the night sky. He only had 2 days left and he couldn't get past this stupid wall he hid in his training. Well, he wasn't going to give up. That wasn't him. He would force his way through this like with everything else if he had to. Now if only he could move his body to get up and do it again. Naruto, are you okay? Naruto looked over to see Sakura walking over to him and kneeling down. Hey Sakura-chan, just taking a break is all. He told her. She didn't believe him as she looked at his hand. There were nasty looking scorch marks on his palm. Sitting down she looked at it. It looked kind of nasty and very painful as well. From seeing how Sasuke's hands got from trying to master that new jutsu of his, she could tell that Naruto was trying not to make her worry. It was a good idea that she had gone to check on him. Seriously, you're really overdoing it like usual. Sakura gently took his hand and saw him wince. See, it hurts just by a light touch, doesn't it? Only a little, he muttered. Then Sakura pinched it as he yelled out. Okay, it hurts a lot more than that. Sakura sighed as she started to pull out bandages and looked at the healing ointment she had left. From patching up Sasuke she barely had any left as she frowned. Honestly, I'm going through too much of these healing supplies on you too. I'm not even sure how effective this will work on this. Maybe I could help. Both young ninja turned to see Shizune walking over to them. She had been watching Naruto struggle with the move for a while now in the trees hidden from sight. There was something strange about the young boy and she was curious about him. Watching him put so much into his training was also admirable as well. He hadn't stopped training for days. He always came back to the hotel tired and usually being carried by Jiraiya. So today she had silently followed him to see if he was making any progress. She knew that Tsunade didn't expect the boy to make it and was making plans on what to do after she won her bet with the boy. A part of her hoped that the boy would win. She wanted Tsunade to put away her past and move forward, to go back home. Shizune knew that Tsunade wasn't really happy living like this, but she was also too stubborn to do anything else. She was now kneeling down next to Sakura looking at the boy's hand. There was a lot of chakra burns into the flesh. May I see that? Shizune asked Sakura for her ointment and looked at it. She placed her finger into it and smelt it and tasted it a little. Ah, standard ointment treatment. You can tell that. Sakura blinked at the woman's skill to tell all of that from just smelling it and tasting it. Shizune smiled at her. I'm Tsunade's apprentice, so I know many different types of treatments. But I think I have something better. Shizune placed her hand over Naruto's as glowing green chakra was seen as Naruto looked at his hand. There was this strange warmth flowing into his hand as the pain was slightly fading away. Pulling her hand away revealed that Naruto's hand looked a little better. Shizune pulled out her own supplies as she started to wrap Naruto's hand up. What was that? Naruto and Sakura asked at the same time. That was medical ninjutsu. It uses chakra to help heal injuries as well as a few other things. Tsunade-sama created and refined hundreds of techniques. In fact, many say that she ratified the medical ninja corps into the best the world has ever seen. Konoha casualties were lowered ever since she started teaching her techniques. Shizune said proudly. Wow, that's handy to have. Naruto could flex his fingers again. Sakura paused to think about it, given how much Sasuke and Naruto got hurt and she usually tried to fix them up. Seeing this technique was something interesting and it might be helpful, she tried to keep up with the boys, but they just had more chakra than her and their skills were different. She tried, but it only seemed that her skills were more supportive at times. Can anyone learn this? Sakura asked the older woman. I mean, do you need large chakra for this or something? Actually, the best medics are those with the best chakra control, Shizune stated as she finished her work. It's very delicate work, so you need a good amount of concentration and chakra control because a lot of the techniques can be very subtle. Sometimes you have to heal things as small as veins or even working on trying to fight infections. Not everyone can do it either, as it also requires much studying and remembering a lot about the human body. Well, that sounds perfect for Sakura-chan, Naruto said suddenly. She always got top scores on all the tests and she did the tree climbing exercise on her first try. Really? Shizune looked at the girl. She remembered that it took herself 5 times to climb the tree when she learned it. In fact, doing the tree climbing exercise in one go was practically unheard of. Shizune looked at the pink-haired girl and was starting to wonder maybe this girl had some hidden talents after all. If you want, I could try and teach you a couple simple exercises to see if you have any talent for it. Really? Sakura was happy to hear about it. Anything that would help her become a better ninja was welcomed. Shizune nodded happily. It would allow her to get to know the girl more, and also it might be nice to help see if she could train the young girl. We can start tomorrow, but let's get Naruto-kun back to the hotel. No way, I can still train, Naruto protested. Shizune looked at the young boy with a determined glare. You are going back to the hotel and you are going to sleep. You are suffering from chakra exhaustion, not to mention chakra burns on your hand. You need to recover, and that's what you're going to do. Now, are you going to behave or are you going to be difficult? Naruto didn't say anything after the lecture from Shizune, and Sakura's opinion of the other woman was starting to grow as she picked the boy up and started to tell him about all the troubles the human body could suffer through with chakra exhaustion and pushing it too far. Sakura listened in, both learning a few things and also somewhat enjoying Naruto getting lectured on their way back to the hotel. Konoha Hospital. In a bed of the special observation wing of the hospital was the silent form of Kakashi Hatake. He had lost consciousness from the fight with Itachi and hadn't woken up since. The doctors were confused by it as they couldn't find anything physically wrong with him. They were still working, but they were unable to figure out why he hadn't woken up, other than some type of trauma had been inflicted. Currently he was the only patient in the room, but not the only person. Kurenai was there to visit him, as she and others did. From time to time, guys certainly came in, as did Asuma, plus others that either worked with Kakashi in the past. Some even Kurenai guessed from Anbu that still regarded the man as someone they honored. But out of everyone, Kurenai had never seen Anko, and she was starting to wonder what had gotten into that girl. Her man was here in bed and she wasn't around. It didn't make sense to Kurenai, and at first she thought maybe she just missed her, but talking with other visitors they hadn't seen her. In fact, Anko was keeping a very low profile and hardly anyone had seen her. Kurenai looked at the still form of the man in the bed and saw the mask on his face. She asked a nurse about why it was still on. They said there was a standing request from Kakashi that if he was ever put into the hospital he wanted his mask on most of the time. It was an oddball thing to request, but since it was Kakashi, Kurenai figured it was just something he would do. The door to the room opened and she was surprised to see one of her students, Hinata, walking in with a small vase of flowers. Hinata. Ah. Kurenai-sensei. Sorry, I didn't know anyone else was here. Kurenai smiled at the young student. Don't worry about it, so you're here to see Kakashi too. Hinata nodded. He always treated me nicely growing up with Naruto-kun. Although she had never said it, Hinata considered Kakashi almost like another uncle. She remembered how he was always kind to her growing up and how sometimes he would supervise her and Naruto as children when they played together. He had even given her presents on her birthday and all kinds of other little things. Slowly she moved to the side of the bed and placed her flowers on a table nearby as she looked sadly at the man. He had always been a little larger than life to her, a famous ninja and yet a good father and man. Looking at him now in this bed so weak, it brought back memories of her mother, and she prayed every night for Kakashi to get better so that Naruto wouldn't know the pain of losing a parent. Are you okay? Kurenai noticed the pain look in her eyes, but also how slow she was moving. Lately you've seemed a little tired. When we can arrange to have practice, and you seem sluggish. I've been getting help from Neji-Nisan. Hinata blushed at being found out. She wanted to keep it a surprise for Naruto, of course. I've been getting up early with him and meeting his team. Wait, you're taking training lessons from Guy? Kurenai wasn't sure how to take that. Guy was a master at getting someone physically fit after all, but he did go overboard a lot. The fact that Hinata was doing this worried her as Hinata wasn't really built for that kind of work. Another sensation was that Kurenai felt a little embarrassed that one of her own students went to another teacher for help. She tried to get with her team as much as possible, but with how crazy things were it was just really difficult. Is that okay? Hinata hadn't really considered if Kurenai would object or anything. I just wanted to get stronger, and also Neji-Nisan is helping with my family's style when his team can't train. Kurenai couldn't fault the girl, after all she had confidence problems, so if this was helping her become a stronger person then Kurenai really couldn't say anything against it. Thinking on it, maybe it was for the best. Hinata really had no skill with genjutsu and seemed to only be able to use the water skill she had trained with. Her physical nature was one of the young Hyuga's drawbacks. She wasn't built for power, which is what the gentle fist wasn't about, thankfully. So maybe this physical training would help her not only in that area she lacked but maybe for her confidence. Just don't overdo things, okay? Kurenai told her student. I know that guy can get pretty intense at times with his training, so try to not get injured because of it. Hinata nodded her head. After that first day of training she was so tired and sore she wanted to crawl into her bed and sleep. The early mornings were hard to get used to, but Neji had always been there for her to help her through things. Even giving her little hints as to how to cope with it all. Tenten was also helpful as well for the girl. Still, the training was very hard, but she didn't mind. She felt like she was getting stronger because of it. Now if you'll excuse me, Kurenai made a move to the door. I have to hunt someone down and get some answers. Kurenai tried the usually places, first Anko's apartment, but it was empty, and then she tried the few places she knew Anko liked to go to, but no luck there either. After that it was trying to track her down by asking if anyone saw her. So far Anko is keeping a really low profile, most people haven't even seen her. Eventually Kurenai tried looking for Anko in the training areas. It took 7 tried to finally track the woman down, and oddly enough she was in the Team 7 training field. Most likely because it was the one she knew wouldn't have anyone there. Kurenai watched as Anko had thrown her jacket over a stump and had protruded some rope and tied it around one of the trees. She was currently beating the hell out of it with her fist, which Kurenai was thankful to notice that they were at least wrapped up. This was a training technique to strengthen your hands, and it could get very nasty if a person went overboard. The rope was to act like padding in a way from the bark of the tree but remain a hard surface to toughen up your fist against. Anko had sweat pouring off her body and looked to have been at this for some time. Kurenai was able to walk right up to the woman, who was so focused in her own little world that she couldn't notice anything around her. Anko, what are you doing here? Anko stopped suddenly and turned to look, and Kurenai could see that the woman's face wasn't very healthy by the looks of it. Anko hadn't been sleeping well lately. Said woman just shrugged and went back to punching. Just training. I'm surprised you haven't seen Kakashi yet. Anko paused a bit. Is he awake? No. Then what's the point? She continued on, throwing her first as though she was battling something in front of her, instead of deep inside of her as Kurenai was seeing. The point is that your boyfriend is in the hospital. Have you even seen him at all? A couple of times. Anko, stop this. Kurenai grabbed the girl's wrists in mid-strike and forced Anko to face her. What's gotten into you? This is nothing like how you act. How would you know? Anko shot back angrily. How does anyone know anything? Unless you can read my mind you can't know how I'm supposed to be, so what makes you say that this isn't normal for me? Kurenai wasn't seeing where Anko was going with this. The woman was obviously upset but seemed to be keeping it all inside. Sure, a ninja wasn't supposed to show emotions, but there was a difference between not showing it and letting them eat you up inside. Kurenai calmed down as she spoke more gently to her friend. Anko, what's wrong? Please tell me. I'm your friend and I can see that something is wrong. Anko just turned to face away as she placed some light punches into her training spot again, although more slowly. I'm thinking of breaking things off. Kurenai's eyes widened. Wait, you mean breaking up with Kakashi? Why? I thought you were happy together. You call this happy? Anko said bitterly. If I wasn't with him would I be feeling the same way now? It's better not to have attachments, to live your life without someone there. Hell, I've done it for more of my life, so why can't I do it again? Sure, the sex was great and it was nice, but it's just not worth it if he dies, and then what? The doctors can't help him, so what if for the rest of his life he's stuck like that? Anko placed one more punch against her target as her body started to shake. She hated this feeling, she hated feeling this weak inside. She never felt so powerless and she despised feeling powerless. Ever since that day when she had been betrayed, the person she had looked up to the most, her entire world had changed. At first things had been hard on her. She had been interrogated for any information on Orochimaru, but she couldn't remember anything anymore. Parts of her life had been stolen and she could never get them back again, plus she had been marked for life. She felt the cursed seal on her neck as it was a constant reminder to her, like a brand on her soul that would never go away. It made her feel dirty at times that he had marked her as though she were his property. It had taken time, but eventually she had overcome it. Some had thought she was a spy, others branded her because of her link to Orochimaru. Few were able to become friends with her, but she just pushed it all aside. She was used to being alone. Oh sure, she had made friends along the way like Kurenai, but when she went home to an empty apartment. But then things had changed. She had met Kakashi and at first she was just a friend, but became something more. So much more that deep inside that she was scared of it. Enko, Kurenai placed a warm hand on her friend's shoulder. Do you know how much I would love to be in your position? Enko turned to face the woman like she was mad. Here you are in a lovely relationship when. Kurenai blushed as she fumbled with her own feelings. You had the courage to actually try. I haven't been able to do that. So what if Asuma was there? You would be in there crying over his body like the good little woman. Enko sneered. Kurenai coughed but continued on. Yes, well, not cry over him, he wouldn't like to see me like that, I bet. But I would be there for him. That's what it means to be in a relationship, Enko, to be there for each other in the good times and in the bad. Enko turned away as her fist balled up. It wasn't supposed to be like this. What wasn't supposed to be like this? It was just a fling at first. Enko shook her head. We were just supposed to date a bit, have some nice sex, and that was it, but then Kurenai moved forward and placed both hands on the woman's shoulder. She could sense that they were finally getting to the heart of the problem, just a little more and they would get to it. Go on, what happened? It's stupid. It's not if it makes you this upset. Yes it is. It wasn't supposed to be like this, but then we started hanging out and starting to talk and share things. God, I told him things I never told anyone, you know that. Stupid of me, I kept everyone at a certain distance, but then I have to open up to him of all people. She punched once more into the ropes hard enough that Kurenai could see some blood on her knuckles. I'm sure you weren't the only one. I'm sure he shared with you as well, and you know how he is. Enko gave a sad laugh. That's just it, I really do know how he is now. I have seen sides to him that no one gets to see. Don't you see? I was just out for a good time, I wasn't out to fall in. She stopped then as her arm dropped. Kurenai gripped her a bit more tightly. Enko, this is important. What is that? It turned into. Enko didn't want to say the words, she didn't want to admit it. She wanted to run from this because it scared her too much to face it. She had lived her entire life without feeling it, so why now of all times? She had been prepared to just live her life. Going from one fling to the next with no real attachments. She figured she would just die in the line of duty, and she had honestly made her peace with it. So then why had she been thinking of a new future for herself? One where she was glad to finally live her life completely. She wanted to deny it, she wanted to bury it and forget about it, but every time she thought of Kakashi on that bed and that she might never see him again as the man he was, it broke her heart. She had never experienced pain like this, and it was only made worse because she couldn't have done anything to stop him from getting hurt. She had been there and she couldn't have done a single thing to help in the end. He had needed her and she couldn't have saved him, and it only made the pain worse. Enko. Kurenai shook her friend and turned her around and was shocked to see that Enko had tears falling. She had never known Enko to cry over anything. She had seen this woman get a kunai in her shoulder and hadn't cried like this. Enko, please, what is it? You have to admit it, I can see that it's eating you up inside, just let it out. Enko didn't want to hear it. She wanted Kurenai to go away, to have everyone go away and just leave her alone again. Enko, you know that you are never alone, Kurenai told her friend. You will always have the support of those close to you, and I know that Kakashi will get better. You will see him again, and whatever issues you have, you can work them out with him, but please, whatever you're holding onto, just let it go. Enko's resistance was breaking, she could feel it, she fought it tooth and nail, but the thought of seeing Kakashi again, it broke something inside of her. She wanted to see him again, to talk to him, to just have him in her life again. Damn you. Enko's head fell as she felt her body shake. Why couldn't you have just left me alone? Because I'm your friend and I don't like to see you in pain. Now what is that you weren't supposed to do? I wasn't supposed to fall in love with him. Enko said gently as she finally said the words that had been haunting her all this time. Everyone close to me ends up hurting me in the end, at least that's what I always thought. But then you and others show up and then Kakashi. God, I never thought I would know what love was. I thought it was just this stupid thing people called lust, but it's not. I feel warm when I'm in his arms, I look forward to going to his place or waking up in bed together. I feel happy when I'm with him, really happy, not just the regular kind. Kurenai hugged the young woman as Enko eventually hugged her back. It's okay, he'll be fine and all those wonderful things will be back in your life again. But what if he's not? What if I lose him? All this time I thought love was just a joke, but then that bastard made me fall in love with him, so now what? I don't think I can take this, my heart hurts worse than when Orochimaru betrayed me. Enko said, holding on tightly to the other woman. You have to have faith, Kurenai told her. You have to have hope that it will all turn out alright. As long as he breathes you know that he'll never stop fighting. She chuckled a bit as she pulled away, wiping her eyes. Yeah, he can be a pretty stubborn guy at times. God, look at me, I feel like such a girl. Well, you are one, Kurenai smiled. Shut up, Enko dried her eyes. You know what I mean, I don't do this girly emotional crap. Kurenai smiled as she looked at Enko. The other woman looked like she had a weight lifted off of her shoulders, not all of it, but at least she wasn't being crushed by keeping all her problems inside. Enko was a good friend who had been given a lousy sensei that had taken advantage of an impressionable young girl who had worshipped him. It had left scars that many didn't see or even think she had, but Kurenai could tell that they were there, hidden under all that acting out and childish personality. Deep inside there was a young girl that had been hurt badly and was just afraid of being hurt again a second time. The worst things a person could face were the demons inside of you. To face yourself is one of the greatest challenges you could ever do in life. Feeling better? I don't know, Enko said honestly. I still feel like crap. If you tell anyone that I was like this, I swear. Kurenai held her hands up. It stays between us, I promise. Enko nodded and then her face fell as she sat down on the ground. Damn, I can't believe I said it. I never even said it to him that well, you know. I feel so screwed up inside over all of this, but I want things to go back to how they were with him and myself. I want him back, but I hate seeing him in that bed, it hurts every time I look at him. Kurenai sat down and put her arm around Enko. I know, but think of how good it will be when he wakes up and you're right there with him. Maybe, Enko sighed as she pulled her knees to her chest and rested her head on them. She hated waiting around, and honestly, how was she supposed to act when he woke up? Admitting to her feelings only brought up other issues, like what if he didn't feel the same, or what if he did, then what? Things were simple and yet now they were all very complicated simply because she let her guard down. Looking at her friend she smirked. So you envy me, huh? So does that mean you finally admit that you like Asuma and wished he would man up and ask you out? You know I could talk to him for you. Enko. Kurenai shouted out as she blushed bright red. I don't need you to do that. Well, you need some kind of kick in the ass, Enko sighed. I went after my man and got him. Show some interest in him, I bet he would take it. I mean, come on, use your sexy side to get his attention and you would have him eating out of your hand. Kurenai hated it when Enko turned the tables on her by using Asuma. Part of it was because there was a little truth in what Enko said. She was interested in Asuma, there was just something about the man that was very attractive to her, and she would be lying if she said she never thought what it might be. Seeing Enko and Kakashi so happy together sometimes was hard to take, since although she masked it, Kurenai wished that could have been her at times. Yes, she was a ninja, but she was also a woman at heart, and sometimes you needed more than just your job and your duty to the village. Enko had gone after Kakashi, and although this was a dark time for them, she could see how deeply Enko cared, even if the other woman had tried to hide from it. Tell you what, Kurenai couldn't believe she was going to say this. When Kakashi wakes up, I'll ask out Asuma. You sure about that? Enko grinned, knowing how that might play out and making plans on watching it all happen. That's how confident that Kakashi will be okay. I'm betting on that, so what do you say? Kurenai asked stubbornly. Enko only grinned larger. No take backs on this, and I mean a real date. Not hanging out as friends, you have to say date and mean it like a couple. Fine, Kurenai turned her nose up blushing slightly. I'm going to hold you to it, Enko warned her. God, he better wake up soon. Enko now had two things to look forward to. Hey Kurenai, thanks. Kurenai only smiled back at her, what are friends for? Chapter 8. Dark Meetings. Tsunade was starting to feel a bit better this day, the bet was nearly over and from what she could tell the boy wasn't going to finish that move. So all she had to do now was just wait it out and then she would make sure Jiraiya honored his end and left this village. Then Tsunade planned to leave very quickly in the opposite direction. Of course not everything was going well. When Jiraiya wasn't training the kids he was constantly annoying her. Joining her for drinks and usually he would make some kind of comment that pissed her off enough to send him unconscious on the ground. She was also starting to worry about Shizune. She was spending a bit too much time with those kids, especially the girl. Every night she would get back to their room as Shizune would go on about how talented the girl was with chakra control. Although it was honestly rare to find someone that gifted for the more subtle arts of ninjutsu, Tsunade couldn't allow herself to get attached. Part of her wanted to tell Shizune to stop seeing them, but the woman was happier than she could remember seeing in a long time. Shizune liked the kids and mainly interacting with others from the village who she hadn't seen in years. Tsunade had to admit that she never really thought about how Shizune might feel about never seeing her home again. Well, what of it? Tsunade wasn't forcing the woman to stay by her side. If she had to, she would force Shizune to go back if it made the woman happy. Tsunade could stand to be alone for some time again, she was used to it and she didn't want Shizune to start regretting staying by her side. Tsunade sighed. This was getting more complicated because deep down she liked having Shizune around, someone that was there for her when she needed them. The young woman was more than an apprentice and more of a friend. In fact, Shizune was most likely the closest friend she had in life currently. Tsunade was on her way to meet Shizune for lunch, but she was wondering if she should tell the woman to not get too close to those kids, it only to make the separation easier on the woman. She was so lost in thought she didn't notice the dark presence coming up from behind until it was several feet away. Looking around, she noticed she was in a small side street, there were no other people walking and it was a good ambush site. She chided herself for letting this happen. She knew that a ninja was to never forget where they were or to let their guard down and to always be ready. She had spent too many years getting soft, something she would have to look into soon. Tsunade paused suddenly as she turned to face them. There were two of them in robes and hats that hid their faces. Glaring at the two men, she widened her stance as she got ready for a fight. All right, why are you two following me? If it's about a department then you should have brought more than just you two. A dark chuckle from one of them made her even more on alert as it was a voice she knew all too well. Well, that's not a very warm welcoming. The man took off his hat showing pale skin with golden snake eyes, or Orochimaru. We haven't seen each other in years and this is the first thing you say to me. And you look like you haven't aged a day either. Well, your age isn't even skin deep, but I don't want to talk about the secrets to looking young. What do you want? She demanded coldly as she flicked her eyes quickly to the other one as he took off his own hat. She didn't know the boy, he looked like a young teenager with white hair and glasses, but there was something about the boy that said he could be trouble. Orochimaru only smiled at her. I wanted to give you an offer, that's all. After all, we're such close friends at one point. Until you betrayed the village, she told him. Please, how is that any different than what you did? He asked. Now that was pushing things too far for her. I left on good terms. I didn't commit crimes against the village and against everything I stand for as a medic. I learned all about those God-forsaken experiments of yours. The things you've done can never be forgiven for the price that had to be paid for whatever you learned from them. Oh, you might change your mind soon enough, he chuckled again. You see, I have learned a lot, even about life and death. It's not such a final thing as you would believe. Isn't that what you always wanted to learn, how to battle death and win? She paused as his words hit a soft spot in her, and how she had always tried to fight death and how many times she had lost. He also knew that, and most likely why he picked those words out. Well, I've learned how and I'm willing to share that, as if you want to listen to my deal. She remained silent. Just the thought of all those horrible things she had learned he had done made her sick to her stomach, and the fact that he most likely hadn't stopped those insane experiments. Looking at him now, she could see that his age wasn't the result of an illusion like her own. There had been a forbidden jutsu that might have worked, but she couldn't believe he might have gone that far. There was also some small part of her that wanted to listen to what he had to say. There was so much death in the world that she was sick of seeing it. He took her silence to continue on. If you join me instead of going back to that village, then you can learn all kinds of secrets, and to give you added incentive, how about I give you back 2 people that you've lost? Her eyes widened as she felt like someone had stabbed her in the heart. You can't mean. Of course I mean it, he grinned widely at her. I'll give you back your lover and your little brother. That's impossible. Normally yes, but you see, while I was in Konoha for a month I took the time to gather a few special specimens. I've perfected a very old technique that a certain relative of yours created, if I'm not mistaken. Now understanding hit her. It had been a forbidden jutsu created by her own great uncle, the second Hokage had developed a technique to revive the dead. The knowledge of that technique had been passed on through the family, but not anything about the technique of the jutsu. The only scroll containing all the notes was supposed to be locked up in the most secure of the Hokage's tower with all the other forbidden knowledge. When her grand uncle had figured out what that technique was, he had ordered the knowledge sealed and forgotten by all, that it was a crime against the world of man and against God. She fought that small part of her that wanted to see them again. They were dead and gone and they should stay like that. But she couldn't silence that little voice that kept speaking all the things she wanted to hear. You know, when I found that jutsu of your family's I was impressed, Orochimaru stated. It was brilliant work, I can see where you get it from. But it was flawed, the returned were only dolls and it was imperfect. It took me years, but I've perfected your family's jutsu. It's amazing what I had to do in order to get it working just right. So what do you say? Come with me to a little field on the west end of the village just outside of the walls and I'll show you. You can see them again, they'll be good as new. Tsunade wanted to tell him to go to hell, but if a fight broke out here it would be trouble, there were too many innocent people in the way. Was that the reason he was picking a wide open area where no one would find them? He most likely had something else planned. There had to be more reason for him showing himself to her. Well, if it came down to a fight she was pretty sure she could take him if she had to, plus he had a feeling he wasn't just going to let her walk away from here. Fine, let's get this over with. You lead the way, she told him, not wanting to show her back to either of them or to get too close to either of them. He grinned at her as he nodded her point and they all started to walk. Kabuto paused for a moment as he looked behind them. He thought he sensed a presence just now, but maybe it was nothing. He continued walking with the 2 others as he didn't want to be left behind. Down the road and hiding behind the corner of a wall was Shizune as she was pressed up against it, nearly holding her breath as she listened to their fading footsteps to make sure they were a good distance away. She finally let her breath out. She has heard everything and knew this was very bad. She needed to get help. Shizune knew that Tsunade wouldn't take any deal by Orochimaru, but she wasn't sure what her plan was. So Shizune had to go and find help, but there was only one group that she could go to for help. Although she trusted Tsunade to handle herself in a fight, this whole thing was giving her a bad feeling. She ran off to the hotel hoping she could find them there. There wasn't much time elsewhere. Man, I can almost get this if I can just figure this out, Naruto muttered. I mean, there has to be a way around it. You've been saying that for 2 days now, Sasuke sighed, getting slightly irritated that he was going on this again. He himself was nearing completing a new jutsu that would allow him to send lightning chakra into his sword. If he could master that, then he would start with other objects soon. Is it really that hard? Sakura asked, sitting between the 2 of them. She had learned early on that sitting between them when they both were irritated was the only way to keep things from blowing up between them. Given that they were out of reach of each other was a big help. Well, it's this last part, Naruto explained to her. I mean, you got to keep the chakra compact but keep it spinning with lots of power. I can only focus on one at a time, but you need to focus on both for it to keep it working. He sighed, slumping slightly. He was running out of time for this bet, and honestly he felt like he was slamming his head against a wall with this problem. Too bad you don't have 2 heads, Sakura commented. That way you can focus on both at the same time. Yeah. Hey yeah, Naruto perked up as inspiration hit him. Sakura-chan, you're a genius, that's exactly what I need. I think he's finally cracked under the stress, Sasuke commented. Shut up. I think I'm really onto something here. Naruto got up and was all excited now. I still got time, but this just might work. Come on, hurry up, we got to get back to the training area so I can try this out. Sasuke leaned into Sakura to whisper to her. What idea did you give him? I'm not sure, she replied. She remembered her comment but she had no idea where he was taking it. It had just been a joke but apparently Naruto had seen something in it and Naruto was the type that could see what others missed or wouldn't think about. One of the reasons he was so unexpected she had learned over the years as his friend. Suddenly a new person ran up as all three young teens turned to look at Shizune. She had seen them on the way to the hotel and was thankful that she had found them. She had pushed herself hard to run here but thankfully although she hadn't been on any missions in years, she kept up her physical strength. So she wasn't out of breath but now that she was here she didn't see Jiraiya. Now she was worried if he wasn't here she wasn't sure they would have the time to find him. Hey Shizune Ni-chan, is something wrong? Naruto asked. He had gotten to like the older woman in the past few days. She was really nice to him even when she scolded him for going overboard with his training. She was like a big sister that he never had so he got to calling her that. She didn't seem to mind and honestly she was kind of cool too with how she knew so much about medical stuff. He didn't understand it but Sakura was taking it up like she was a natural at it. Where's Jiraiya? She asked looking around. Three faces seemed to take on the same deadpan expression. He said he needed some time to think. Naruto told her. That meant he was getting depressed over that he might have to let Tsunade go and was currently off at a certain bar drinking and having fun, as he liked to say. Shizune cursed her luck. We need to find him fast. He's the only person I know that can help Tsunade out of the trouble she's in. What trouble? Sakura asked her seeing the fear on the woman's face. Orochimaru is here and she went with him outside of the village, she told them as all three of the genins froze in place. They all remembered encountering Orochimaru in the Forest of Death. Sasuke's hand felt the mark on his neck, the ever-constant reminder of that man. Please, we have to get Jiraiya as fast as possible, Shizune asked of them. We know where he is but why is Tsunade with Orochimaru? Sakura asked worried how this sounded. I think she plans on doing something dangerous, Shizune told them. She might have gone into this thinking she could handle it but I just don't know. Field outside of the village. Tsunade looked around her. The village was just out of sight and some woods were in the opposite direction. The place was pretty barren actually and no one seemed to come this way. That didn't surprise her. The main roads were on the other side of the village so there wouldn't be much traffic here. She had no idea what he had planned but even if she believed him in his claim that he could bring them back, she couldn't do it. She knew what a crime that jutsu was and she would stop him. He had perverted too much medical knowledge for his own gains, hurt too many people and there was no forgiveness in her. She still remembered when they brought in that girl that had been his apprentice. She couldn't remember her name but Tsunade had been brought in to help out. The poor girl had lost so much of her memories that even Tsunade had failed to bring back. They finally stopped roughly around the center of the field. That was fine with her, it was time she wanted to get this over with. Well, no one should get in our way out here, Orochimaru smiled. So then, where were we? I believe you were going to tell me something that I wanted to hear and then try and convince me to join you but let's just say we did that and get to the real point of all of this. Tsunade told him clearly not wanting to drag this out any more than was needed. I highly doubt you actually thought for a moment you could convince me of all people to join you and just ignore all the things you've done or will do. I figured the reason you wanted us to come out here and it wasn't just so that you wouldn't have privacy for a chat. He chuckled just then. I'm not surprised you figured that out. I was hoping that I could talk you into joining me but I also knew it was a long shot. I figured that I had nothing to lose even if I tried. So you won't join me? Pity, I really could have used your talents. Oh well, you see, even though I know that you might not rejoin the village, I can't take the chance that you would go back. I took a long time in order to weaken the village as it is now. If you return it might give the village some hope and we can't have that. Plus if I get you out of the way then my other targets would be much easier to deal with. Other targets? What other targets? Tsunade was thinking that maybe he could be talking about Jiraiya but he said there was more than one. She didn't think he meant Shizune. Sure, she was a great medic, one of the bests, but was she really worthy to be killed for that? You see, there is a young boy that I've marked that I want, he grinned licking his lips. His eyes are something that I need, with them I could learn so many jutsus in just a few years. The power I could have with them is nearly unimaginable. I hope that he'll be more willing for my offer of power. After all, I know what he wants most and I can give it to him. Tsunade figured out he had to be talking about the Uchiha boy and it didn't sound like he was out for the boy's best interests. Who's the other one? A certain Jinchuriki boy, he told her. You see, I used to belong to a certain group and that boy and others like him, well, they're important. I never did learn the full reason. I knew it was more than what the leader of this group told us, but I was only there for my own reasons anyway. Fact is, we parted not on the best of terms and they need all 9 of them. So if one were to say, die, well then they wouldn't be too happy about that. He laughed then as Tsunade looked at him in anger. He truly had fallen from when they had been kids. That young boy she had known would never have done any of this. This was just the proof that he had gone totally insane in the years she had last seen him. But it was a old calculating insanity of some kind. He was fully aware of himself, but he just didn't care how his actions hurt others. He had always been a bit cold and distant, but it was like she was seeing a totally different person in the body of her once friend. Well, this was going to be easy then. A part of her worried that maybe there was some old part of him still left, but by the looks of it there wasn't. The old Orochimaru was long gone and dead, replaced by this monster in his flesh. She didn't know this person, and the fact that he was threatening children made her blood boil in a cold rage. She didn't care about Konoha, at least that's what she always said, but the thought of any kid, even if they were genins and should know what kind of world they live in, they were still kids in her eyes. She kept seeing her younger brother's body under that bloody sheet in her mind. He had gone too far this time as she dug in her heels preparing for the fight. She wasn't sure what that boy with him was or what he could do, but she would keep an eye on him just in case. Her main focus, however, was Orochimaru. I'm going to do what the old man should have done to you a long time ago, she told him coldly. He only laughed. There's that old fire in your eyes. Let's see if age has slowed you down a little, shall we? Blue Room. Jiraiya had found this establishment a couple of days into their time in this village, and honestly he was glad for the distractions it gave him. Oh sure, he had been trying to train the kids as best he could, give advice to Naruto, but the only way for the boy to learn the Rasengan was to learn it yourself. You could know the steps, but it was up to the person to discover how to put it all together and get it working. Jiraiya believed that in order to make a jutsu your own, you needed to discover it yourself, to learn through failure and achievement, to really get your hands dirty, and through hard work to finally master it could you truly understand a jutsu. It was one of the things he always argued with against Orochimaru while on the same team. Although now he was wondering if he should break that rule and try and get the kid to learn the Rasengan, but despite all his flaws he wasn't a cheater. Plus the boy was eager to learn it himself and prove that he could master it. The deal line was fast approaching and he wasn't looking forward to returning to Konoha empty-handed and having to face the Hokage with failure. He also hadn't been able to get Tsunade to see reason either. So of course he was feeling depressed and maybe a little old, so he did what he usually did to cheer himself up. Go out drinking and find some pretty girls to keep him company, hence why he was now in the Blue Room, as the place had decent drinks and decent women who all seemed to be dressed in blue. Currently he was on another drink as he had 3 women around him. They smelled nice and they had nice skin. He knew that the only reason they were with him was because he was paying for their time, not that he really cared. When you got to his age and didn't have someone in your life, when you felt empty inside in those dark times alone with a broken heart, you would cherish even the illusion that he was indulging in. So he just went with it, enjoying himself, and maybe in a way he would feel like he was actually enjoying his time. Well, maybe it wasn't that hard given that these were pretty ladies he was with and he did enjoy pretty girls. I must say you ladies are sure something, he grinned like an idiot. That's nice of you to say, the woman on his left said, cuddling up to his side. Yeah, you're a lot of fun to hang out with, the other spoke up. Jiraiya wasn't sure if they were telling him the truth or just telling him what he wanted to hear, but he didn't care. So how much longer are you staying? The third asked. We hope you're staying for a long time. Well ladies, my time in this place is nearly gone. I got to head back home soon, but before that how about we really party? He laughed. If he was going to get into trouble when he got home, he might as well enjoy himself before he had the old man got to him. There he is. A very loud and familiar voice was heard among the crowd. Jiraiya groaned. What was he doing here? He turned to look to see Naruto and the other 2 trying to make their way in, although given their ages it was no wonder that the doorman was trying to hold them off. He was also surprised to see Shizune was here with them. That was odd. Naruto was yelling up a storm as he sighed. He better see what the kid wanted or else they might kick him out for all the trouble this was starting to cause. "Excuse me ladies," Jiraiya said before getting up and walking up to them. "Okay, what's so important that you kids might end up getting me kicked out of here?" "Jiraiya, you need to help Tsunade," Shizune told him frantically. "She's in trouble and we need your help." Now he was getting serious. "What trouble?" "It's that snake freak again," Naruto said. "Snake freak? Orochimaru," Shizune clarified. Jiraiya was very still for a moment as he processed that before leaving the club so quickly he left the others behind for a second. They quickly caught up to him just outside as he looked at them. "Point me in the right direction," he told them seriously. Chapter 9, Ghosts of the Past. It had been a very long time since Tsunade had to push herself, a long time since she had last been in a fight where she couldn't just blow through the opposition. She had forgotten what it was like, the danger, the excitement, the fear of facing something that was on par with you. Given her age, she was pleased to see that her body still could match up in a fight like the one that had started not long ago. Sure, she felt certain aches and pains she didn't when she had been younger and in her prime. Her body was only slightly slower, but only so that most likely was the only one that could tell. She was still quick enough to dodge attacks, to see them coming and to give back with enough force of her fists to show Orochimaru that she hadn't lost her touch. But Orochimaru didn't show any signs of having slowed down over the years, a bit annoying for her but workable. The young man, however, was a different manner. Her old teammate did most of the attacks, but then he would come in whenever he saw any kind of weakness. Just like at this moment, the young man came at her from behind. She twisted her upper body as she tried to backhand the boy's head off. Kabuto, however, was ready as he ducked and ran by her. One of his hands started to glow blue with chakra as he touched her leg and arm as he passed by her with a grin on his face. Tsunade didn't notice anything wrong at first, until she tried to move her left leg but her right leg moved instead. She tripped, confused what happened, her medical mind going through possible things like a concussion, but dismissed it as she hadn't received any head injury. Orochimaru kicked her in the chest, sending her flying and landing on her back. She tried to get up, but it was like her body wasn't acting like it normally would. She only managed to get into a sitting position as she tried to work it out. Her mind quickly came to the conclusion that her nervous system had been switched up. She could feel all her limbs, but thinking about moving her left arm seemed to make her right one move. Her neural impulses from her brain to her muscles had been switched around, and the only way to do that was through medical ninjutsu. Looking at the white-haired teen, she understood a lot more about him. That kind of advanced move wasn't something a novice could do. For someone that young to be able to use this kind of technique in a battle condition wasn't easy. Looks like she figured it out. Kabuto pushed up his glasses slightly as she caught Tsunade glaring right at him. From how she was studying him, he had guessed that she now knew what he had done. It was to be expected of the great Tsunade, whose medical ninjutsu was unrivaled. Even his skills he knew paled in comparison, but he wasn't some first-year student either. He had spent years learning from his father, who had been a medical ninja. Well, to be honest, he never considered that man his father. His real parents had died that day at the Battle of Kikyo Pass when Konoha had killed a group of enemy ninja. His parents had been a part of that. Many thought he had been too young to remember, but he still remembered that day. He remembered being under the dead body of his real father and the hatred for the Leaf Village. How appropriate that they were going to destroy one of the great ninjas of Konoha, but also one of the greatest medical minds in the world as well. Kabuto also wanted to show his master that his faith in him was not misplaced. He ran forward to attack while she was weakened. It came as a great surprise to him when she suddenly in the last moment used her right hand and managed to land a hit on him. The power of her fist was like nothing else as he was quite literally blown away from her. He landed onto the soft earth with a loud thud as he slowly tried to get up. His whole body hurt from that blow, every nerve was screaming out as he tried to calm his mind and allow his body to heal from the damage. Using his medical knowledge, he pours his chakra into his nervous system to help fix the problem, but it would still take time to fully heal. "How were you able to still move?" he forced out as he got up on shaky legs. Tsunade stood without a problem, grinning. "I'll admit that was a good idea on anyone else that would have worked. But who do you think came up with that technique? I know how it works and how to use my chakra to send my neural impulses back to the way they are. I know every inch of how my body works and how the human body works in general. Techniques like that might catch me by surprise for a moment but not for long. Now let me show you another technique that I'm more famous for. She raised her leg high up, nearly straight up, as she brought it down into the ground as the force of the impact split the ground, forcing the two men across from her to jump out of the way. Orochimaru laughed with a large grin on his face. Good, there's that old fire of yours. I'll show you more than just my fire, she told him. Orochimaru was about to reply when he heard something coming from his sharp ears. He could sense a presence coming and he wasn't even attempting to hide. He noticed that Kabuto and Tsunade suddenly noticed something as well. It wasn't long until a large toad leapt among them, slamming down into the ground with a huge amount of force. Thanks for the ride, Jiraiya told the large yellow toad as he and everyone got off. He dispelled the frog as soon as everyone was safe. This wasn't a combat type anyway. He had called this toad as it was for fast travel, given he was one of the greatest jumpers among the toad summons. What are you lot doing here? Tsunade asked them, slightly annoyed that Jiraiya would bring Genin of all things into this. Didn't he understand how dangerous this fight could get? Well, I heard there was an old team reunion and I guess my invite got lost, Jiraiya countered back. Plus I couldn't leave the kids unsupervised. I was doing fine on my own, Tsunade told him. Well, I have to admit I wasn't expecting you, old friend, Orochimaru chuckled, not at all put off by his arrival. And you brought your own students, seems fitting as I brought one of my own. Hello again, Naruto-kun, Kabuto grinned at the Genin team. You jerk, my dad told me that you were nothing more than a traitor. Naruto shouted out at him as his friends glared at the glasses-wearing teen. They had actually liked him at first when they had met him, but learning the truth of his alliances, all three of them were giving looks that could kill. Traitor. Kabuto acting hurt by that. I'm no traitor, you have to be loyal first to be a traitor, and I was never loyal to the village that destroyed my family. Yes, it was so nice to meet someone whose hatred for the village matched my own, Orochimaru added in. Face it, old friend, you've lost, Jiraiya said to Orochimaru. We got you outnumbered. Orochimaru chuckled, I suppose you are correct about that one, at least for the moment. You see, I had a surprise in store just in case things went so wrong that I needed help, or if she actually did choose to come with me. Well, maybe I'll show you something special I had planned now. He bit his thumbs to draw blood and quickly went through a series of hand seals. Jiraiya was able to follow them to know that they were some kind of summoning, but something seemed off about it. He knew that Orochimaru could summon snakes, but this wasn't that kind of summons, it seemed slightly different. As his hands hit the ground, the black inked seals appeared on the ground as suddenly two large wooden coffins appeared. Now Jiraiya had an idea of what was going on and he wished he had figured it out sooner to stop him. He had no idea who was in those caskets, but whoever they were, they couldn't be good. The lids opened and fell and Jiraiya's eyes widened at the sight. Tsunade, who was behind him, he heard her struggle to hold a horrible cry back in her throat at the sight. This was the worst possible thing to happen for her, and Jiraiya once again cursed their old friend. Standing in the two coffins was a young man and a young boy. They were Dan, Tsunade's old lover, and her little brother Naoki. No. Tsunade could only just whisper it out as the two bodies opened their eyes, and just looking at them they seemed just like how she remembered them, but she knew this was wrong. They were dead and should be at peace, but as the eyes opened it was like a dagger had been plunged into her heart. Both resurrected males walked out of their caskets. Bastard, Jiraiya muttered, knowing this wasn't the kind of thing that Tsunade should see. Well, is that any way to talk to me after I made this great family reunion? Orochimaru asked him. Well, no matter, I had planned to use them anyway since I did take the time when I was back home to gather the material for this. Now you two, why don't you say hello to everyone? I'm sorry about this, Dan spoke for the first time. But we have to do what he says even if we don't want to. With that he and Naoki charged forward. The Genins decided to take this one as the adults were unsure what to do for a split second. Tsunade wasn't sure she could bring herself to fight with the two. For Shizune, she was rooted in place seeing her long-dead uncle again, as Jiraiya couldn't afford to take his eyes off Orochimaru. When the Genin jumped in, he went after Orochimaru as Shizune quickly went after Kabuto. Naruto, Sakura and Sasuke attacked the two resurrected dead with their weapons. Although the dead ninja fought back, Naoki, being a Genin, didn't have as much skill as Dan did. So it was Sasuke that managed to slice his sword into Naoki, who looked surprised. This boy wasn't much older than he was, but he had moved so fast. As soon as Sasuke took his sword out of the body, it began to heal. Naruto and Sakura combined their attacks on Dan, although the older man was a lot more skilled than Naoki. He had been a fully trained ninja for years and had seen a war before being killed in said war. He had seen more battles and fights than all of Team 7 combined at the moment. Naruto soon found himself kicked to the ground as Sakura tried her tonfa only to miss and had been counter-attacked. "Okay, this isn't going well," Sakura said as she put her tonfa into a guard position. "Man, this sucks," Naruto muttered as he looked to see that Sasuke was still fighting the one that was their own age. He could see that Jiraiya and Tsunade had started a battle with Orochimaru. From what he could see, it was a battle like he hadn't seen and he kind of wished he would watch. The two Sannin were going up against the third one and they seemed that they were going all out. But he had to quickly focus back into his own fight as Dan rushed towards him. Naruto jumped back to avoid the attacks as the man pulled out a kunai to attack. Naruto used the family sword to deflect the blows, but the guy was fast and good. "You're not bad for someone your age," Dan told him. "Sorry for doing this, but I have no choice." "That's not exactly a comfort," Naruto shouted out, trying to keep ahead of the man. "You know what, screw this." He made a bunch of shadow clones and attacked the man head on from all sides. He figured this would at least slow the man down. Although the wounds seemed to heal almost as fast as Naruto's clones could inflict them. Plus the man was slowly getting rid of the clones one by one. "I might need a new plan soon," Naruto muttered, trying to think of how to deal with someone that was already dead and couldn't be hurt or killed. Shizune attacked Kabuto as she pulled back her sleeve as the device she kept hidden there full of automated firing blades. She pulled on the firing line as they launched at the traitor. He pulled out a kunai as he managed to knock all the blades out of the air. Despite his age, his skills she found were above what she expected. Kabuto moved in close to start attacking with his kunai as she managed to move and dodge. This was something she was waiting for as she inhaled and felt the chakra into her lungs go into the special poison she kept in them. She exhaled as a large amount of poison gas was released from her mouth. She tried to aim it into the boy's face, but it seemed that he was ready for something like that, dodging away from the gas. The problem with her jutsu was that when she sent the gas out, she couldn't see because the gas would sometimes obscure her field of vision. Kabuto had used that to his advantage to sneak out of her line of sight. Kabuto saw that Tsunade and Jiraiya was giving Orochimaru trouble. He couldn't do anything about Jiraiya, but Tsunade was another matter. He had read all kinds of reports on certain people and he knew what Tsunade suffered from. He ran into the battle as he made a cut on his palm. He flexed his hand to make sure that he had enough blood cupped in it before he ran at Tsunade. She saw him coming and was prepared for an attack, but when he threw the blood at her, it splattered over her. When Tsunade realized what was on her, she just froze. She couldn't move as her mind went to a halt. The horror kept coming back to her even as Kabuto kicked her across the field. "Tsunade!" Jiraiya called out, seeing the blood on her, knowing that she was frozen up. "You're looking in the wrong direction," Orochimaru told him as he attacked Jiraiya. "Lady Tsunade." Shizune had been following Kabuto, but he had had too much of a lead. She rushed as fast as she could to get to her master's side. Kabuto took advantage of this as he pulled out a small smoke bomb and threw it in her direction. She immediately closed her eyes, mouth and held her breath, knowing full well the kinds of trouble smoke could have on the human body. That is until she felt a burning sensation on her skin and came out of the smoke crying out in shock and in pain as her body slumped to the ground. That smoke had some kind of toxin in it. Her medical mind quickly raced as she reached for her medical supplies she kept on her body. She had several antitoxins, but she just hoped that whatever she had would work. But she could look up in horror as Kabuto started to attack Tsunade over and over again. She forced her hand to work as her body was slowly going numb, not a good sign for her as she felt her fingertips touch her antitoxin supplies. "Granny!" Naruto saw that Kabuto was going for a killing blow by this point. He left Sakura and Sasuke to deal with their enemies, leaving a good supply of clones with them to help them out since he was closest to her. Naruto moved as fast as possible to reach her in time. To help out, he threw out a shuriken from his pouch on his belt. He was hoping the weapon would give him more time. Thankfully it did, as he took the time to deflect it as he ran at the man thrusting his sword out at him. He really thought that he managed to get in a good shot, until Kabuto sidestepped it just enough for the blade to just pass his body within a hair's breadth of his body. He saw Kabuto's smile before he slammed the ring part of the kunai into his wrist, hitting the nerves. His hands instantly opened, dropping the weapon as Kabuto then used his free hand to punch him in the face. Well, I have to say I'm a bit disappointed in such an attack. Aren't you the one that keeps talking about being Hokage? Kabuto asked him with an evil smirk on his face. Then again, maybe it's better you just die here, such a stupid dream. I nearly laughed when I heard that you proclaimed that you would be Hokage. You have to realize that such a foolish dream has taken the lives of so many. What makes you think you can do it? You should learn that dreams are for children, and in the real world you can never attain such things. Kabuto readied his blade as the boy slowly got up. You should just lay there and die, it would make everything so much easier on you. Shut up, Naruto yelled out. I will be Hokage. I don't care what you think or anyone else, I plan on getting strong enough to become Hokage and protect the village. I love the village and I plan on defending it with my life. For my family, for my friends, and for everyone that means something to me, I will do anything to protect them all. To be Hokage means to protect everything that's important for you. Tsunade heard all of this as echoes of the past came back. I love this village, so I'm going to be Hokage. That had been her little brother when he first proclaimed his dream. I want to protect everyone. That had been Dan when she had decided on giving him her necklace. For a split second she saw both of them in Naruto, but there was something more in him. There was this fire in him that they hadn't had when they proclaimed their dream. She hadn't seen this kind of fire in, it was so long. When was it? Then it hit her, she hadn't seen this since her grandfather would talk about the village, when her granduncle would talk about being Hokage, to even when the third had talked to her about what it meant to be a ninja of the hidden leaf. They all had that special fire in them, the will of fire to be exact. Naruto formed a seal and made a clone as he ran at him, as she knew that rushing head on like that would be suicide. She cried out for him to stop, but then she stopped as she saw something strange. The clone was doing something with the real Naruto's open palm, and suddenly energy started to form. She couldn't believe her eyes as slowly the Rasengan formed. That's impossible, he's only a genin, he shouldn't be able to pull something like that off. But he was, as Kabuto was taken by surprise. He was about to move away when he felt something grab his leg. He looked down in surprise as another shadow clone had come out of the ground. One of Naruto's clones had gone with the original as a secret plan of attack. He had gone through the ground to come up and surprise Kabuto. The other clone, when he had finished helping the original, this clone grabbed Kabuto's other arm. This is my will to be Hokage. Naruto shouted out as he rammed it into the boy's chest. Rasengan. Kabuto had underestimated the boy as he felt the jutsu trying to tear his inside apart. He pumped as much chakra as he could to heal the injuries as they happened, but the force of the impact was forcing him back. He put just enough chakra into his free hand and managed to use a chakra scalpel. He felt it cut into his insides, knowing he was going for vital areas. He yelled out at the jutsu took him a few yards away as he fell into his back, the force catching the two clones, dispelling them. He landed on his back, unable to move from the pain in his body. His shirt was ripped and his chest looked horrible as he gasped for air. He had never felt such pain, but thanks to certain techniques was kept alive, but he was unable to move. He did manage to laugh out painfully as he slowly managed to turn his head to look at the boy's body hit the ground. So much for your will to be Hokage. Tsunade saw the boy fall and something inside of her broke. She couldn't let it happen again. She forgot the blood, she forgot the horrors as she saw this single boy she had barely known show her something that she had forgotten about. Shown her something that her grandfather and everyone that followed him had embodied. She would not let this flame go out. She quickly went to his side, turning him over and placing her hands on his chest as she began a quick check to see what was wrong with her medical chakra. She could feel the damage and it was amazing the boy was still alive. No, not again. I won't let someone die on my watch again, not like this. She told herself as she worked as hard as she could to repair the damage she could feel inside of the boy. She was not going to fail again, and as she saw the blood on her arms she didn't feel the fear anymore. Whatever chains had held her down were suddenly gone from her mind as she did what she had dedicated her life to doing. Saving fellow ninja of the leaf, protecting them and making sure they could go back to the village that they all loved. Jiraiya took a moment to look over the battlefield. The genins were having trouble with the two dead ninja. Naruto was down as Tsunade was actually healing him. Shizune was getting back up apparently from something that had happened to her, and Orochimaru was still fresh in this fight. He had to turn this around, but looking where everyone was positioned, he was hoping to get rid of a few pieces in one go. He started with the hand seals, yelling at Sakura and Sasuke to jump out of the way. He hoped the kids didn't get stuck in this jutsu. Jiraiya placed his hands on the ground as suddenly a large part of the ground turned into swampland. It was a jutsu that was great for capturing people. The two dead enemies were luckily caught as Naruto's clone stayed to hold the two, as they also were taken by the jutsu. Orochimaru however had seen it coming and jumped freely out of the way. Jiraiya knew it was a gamble, but he had to try. At least this freed up the kids. Orochimaru scowled slightly as the fight was not going the way he was hoping. Kabuto had been actually taken out, and Jiraiya had managed to get his two resurrected ninja were now stuck in swamp water of all things. He could see them struggle, but from how fast they were sinking they weren't getting out anytime soon. Now that Tsunade had somehow gotten up even while now covered in blood, things weren't going well for him. Now he saw both of his old teammates facing him ready to go. In a one-on-one he was sure he could take either of them, but two-on-one he wasn't that confident. The battle was over, he could admit that, but maybe it wouldn't be a total loss. Tsunade was working on the Jinchuriki boy. Kabuto must have did something to him, and whatever it was, Orochimaru figured that Kabuto had done something serious. If the boy did die, that would hinder Akatsuki's plans for him and the others like him. Well, it wasn't a total loss then if that happened. Now he just needed to take Kabuto and leave, and with that boy down he doubted Jiraiya would leave. Plus there was the fact that his two resurrected pawns would still be left behind. I have to admit this day was looking up at first, Orochimaru told Jiraiya. I had hoped to harm the leaf in another way, but it looks like fortune isn't with me today. Planning on slithering off then. Jiraiya didn't want to let him leave. If he did, there was no telling whenever they would get a chance like this again. They could take Orochimaru out right here and right now. He was too dangerous an enemy to let go. I've had my fun and there is always another day. He grinned as he raised his arms as two large purple snakes came out from the sleeves. They opened their mouths as Jiraiya was expecting some kind of venom attack or for them to bite him. He didn't expect a large amount of purple smoke to come out of both snakes. Jiraiya was about to rush through the smoke in a blind charge. Yes, it was insane to attack a target he couldn't find, but he figured that Orochimaru was already moving to run off. Although he halted just in time when his eyes noticed the grass was starting to turn brown where the smoke hit. His mind screamed out poison gas as he quickly jumped back just before hitting the smoke. He wished he knew wind jutsu, but it just wasn't his element. He had no talent for that type. He looked to see that the smoke was covering a large area, but he ran to the right anyway to get around it. Although he knew he might be too late, he had to try, but by the time he cleared the poison smoke as it started to dissipate, he saw that Orochimaru was gone. When the smoke was completely gone, he noticed that while everyone was focused on Naruto, the boy he had hit with the Rasengan was gone as well. Jiraiya mentally cursed. He would have to have a plan for that jutsu in their next conflict, and he planned on not letting Orochimaru run amok forever. He hurried back to Naruto, who looked a little worse for wear as the others were gathered around him. He didn't ask how he was doing, she would just get annoyed with him and tell him to shut up so she could concentrate anyway. The others were gathered around, although he did notice that Shizune and Sasuke had noticed Kabuto's disappearance as well, but said nothing, figuring that there wasn't much to say anyway. Tsunade was giving everything she had. She wouldn't see another life die, not on her watch. Thankfully it looked like she was getting help from the boy's prisoner. His body was barely holding together. If it had been anyone else, then Kabuto's attack would have killed them. Naruto's unique healing traits allowed for the boy to survive, but it was still close, too close. She stopped her treatment when she was confident that she was done. For a moment there was nothing until Naruto groaned as his eyes flickered open. "Welcome back, Gaki," Jiraiya told him, honestly relieved to see the boy was okay. Although he knew that if anyone would help him it was Tsunade, but he had still been worried. After all of his apprentices were dead now, and a part of him worried that Naruto might join that list. "My chest hurts," Naruto groaned out. Not surprising given what I had to fix in there. Tsunade felt a sense of accomplishment. This was the first person she had saved in years, and she was surprised how good it felt. But as she stood up, she couldn't ignore it anymore as she walked over to the swamp that was holding two people that she had loved most in life. They were up to their torso in the swamp but were still struggling. The Naruto clones had run out of chakra and had dispelled nearly after the jutsu had been cast. Despite their circumstances, Dan looked up at her and smiled. It was nice to see you again, my love. Dan, I'm sorry. I tried. Tears filled her eyes looking at the man she had loved and had died in front of her. It's okay, I know you did your best. Dan looked at them all now. I can see that the next generation will make a great impact on the world. His eyes landed on Naruto. You truly have the will of fire in you from what I saw. Hey, of course I plan on being Hokage one day, you know, Naruto proclaimed even while being held up by his teammates. Hokage, huh? Dan smiled at him. Perhaps you might be able to do it where I failed. Couldn't we just keep you around? Tsunade knew it was wrong, but she had them both back again. She didn't want to lose them again. But she knew that this wasn't going to last, she just had to ask. I'm sorry sis, her little brother looked at her sadly. But if we weren't stuck in this we would still be attacking. I don't want to hurt any of you, but if you let us go, we'll just keep on attacking until you're dead. Tsunade felt her heart in her throat as she closed her eyes and nodded. It was nice seeing you again sis, he told her smiling. Also sorry for dying, I just wanted to make you proud of me. I love you sis and I hope you're taking care of Grandpa's village for me. Tsunade swallowed as she nodded her head. I'll miss you. I know, but it looks like you're not alone, Naoki told her, seeing everyone around her. Dan looked to Jiraiya as the man looked so much older, but he knew that time was short. All this time his body was working on trying to get out and they couldn't let this go on for too long. He knew that the man cared for Tsunade and he needed to know someone was watching over her. He could still remember the last time he had seen her, in the rain, crying over his body. Jiraiya, look after her for me, he told the old ninja. You got it. Dan looked to Tsunade, look after yourself and the village, my love. Shizune, you've grown into a fine woman, sorry I couldn't have been there to watch it. Thank you uncle, Shizune wiped the tears in her eyes. Goodbye, Tsunade told him as she closed her eyes. She couldn't watch this, couldn't watch them disappear again. Jiraiya completed a few hand seals as the swamp started to get deeper, pulling the two into its depths. Two figures who have been brought back to life had finally said their goodbyes that they couldn't have in life. They sunk down into the dark depths deep into the earth where they would be forever sealed. Tsunade rose up on her legs as she looked out over the area that would forever hold two of the most precious people in her heart. Her heart was filled with rage towards Orochimaru, sadness over losing them again, but she found a bit of peace there as well. She never got to say goodbye to them before and now she had this chance. So what now? Jiraiya asked her. Tsunade was quiet as she thought about everything before answering. I think I've had enough fun, it's time for me to go home. Jiraiya despite himself grinned, so that means you'll take up the old man's job then. Besides, the brat won our bet in the end. Well, I can't leave it to you now, could I? She told him as she looked at everyone else. I guess we'll have to patch you kids up. It will be good training for you Sakura if you really want to learn medical jutsu, since Shizune keeps talking about it. Jiraiya knew that she was hurting and just pushing the pain away for later, but there was a light in her eyes that he hadn't seen in years. For a moment it was like the old Tsunade he knew was finally back. Feeling a few aches in his body, he was glad this mission was over and they could go home. Taking one last look at the swamp, he gave a small nod to his head towards those poor souls. He didn't want to do something like this, but there was no choice. They didn't know how to undo the jutsu, maybe one day he would find a way. At any rate, it was time to go home. Chapter 10, Home Again. Konoha Main Gate. Finally we're back. Naruto yelled out, excited to reach the gates. It had taken them some time, but they had finally reached home, and it was a good thing because they were all glad to see their home again. Tsunade looked at the village. She could see the damage still present in a few areas, but overall it wasn't as bad as she could have feared. Plus, walking through the gates gave her a sense of peace she hadn't felt in a long time. For the first time she actually felt like she was coming home, and she liked how it felt. For a moment it was like she had never left, and she asked herself how she could have forgotten this feeling. Jiraiya looked at her with the corner of his eye and only grinned slightly to himself. It was good that he could see that she was enjoying being home again, and it was great having her home again too. This was where she belonged, not wandering the world trying to forget her past. Here was where she could do the most good and where the village needed her most. The genin looked just as excited as well from the looks of them. Man, I can't wait to show my dad my new technique, Naruto happily as they marched towards the check-in station where all ninja had to check in and out so the village would have records on who left and arrived on what time and date. Oh yeah, plus Hinata-chan and everyone else, man, they are so going to be jealous. You're not the only one that learned something, Sasuke told him, not wanting to be left out. The trip back had given him enough time to get a handle on the ability of putting lightning chakra into the metal rods. He had been moving on up to his sword, although he might have to get a new one. His blade wasn't made to have chakra bump through it. Certain weapons were specialty made for this purpose. Jiraiya told him that once he mastered it, it wouldn't matter what the blade was made of as long as it had metal. He would train a bit more to see if he could master it to the point that he wouldn't have to get a whole new weapon set for it. How about you, Sakura-chan? Naruto asked his friend. Granny seems to be working you hard. That earned him a bob on the head from Tsunade with a small tick of anger on her forehead. She really wished at times he would stop calling her that. Naruto glared up at the women, but her own glare sent back simply told him not to push his luck. The woman could hit him clear across the village if she really wanted to. It's actually pretty great. Sakura jumped in quickly while mentally wondering why she always had to play peacekeeper at times like this. I've been learning a lot. She's a quick study, Tsunade said proudly at the girl. Sakura had an uncanny natural ability to remember what she learned. Tsunade was starting to wonder if the girl had some kind of photographic memory or something, but it was more than that. Sakura could also grasp the concepts, not just remember them from what Tsunade could tell. That was much more important to understand the material, because then when something unexpected happened you could adapt. I think in a month she might be ready for some more practical exercise. Tsunade told them all and then looked at Sakura. That is if you're willing to take extra training under myself and Shizune when we have the time. Sakura's eyes lit up. To train under them would be amazing, there was so much she could learn. Of course. They got to the check-in when the two Chunins on duty saw who the group was. It was a shock. Two of the legendary ninjas, one of them Tsunade, who had returned home for the first time in so many years. It was one of those things that actually made this boring posting worthwhile at times. But as soon as they saw Naruto Hatake, they were quickly reminded of another duty that they had. It was one of the things that no one wanted to do when they got this posting. Naruto Hatake, one of the men said to the boy. Yeah, something wrong. Naruto wondered why the two Chunin looked so uncomfortable. Tsunade and Jiraiya, however, picked up on something was wrong. They had enough life experience to notice the subtle signs in the two Chunins. You should check in on the hospital, one of them spoke up. What? Why? Now Naruto was getting a bad feeling that something was wrong. Kakashi Hatake was placed there weeks ago. He's been in a coma ever since. The other one finished hating this part of the job, especially to say something like this to a kid. Naruto took only a second to process what was said before he rushed off, soon to be followed by everyone else. Konoha Hospital. It had been an hour since they had gotten to the hospital and the entire team was currently waiting in the hall as Tsunade was working on Kakashi. Naruto had rushed over here as soon as possible and had demanded to be taken to his father's room. When they had finally gotten to the room and saw the still form of Kakashi, Tsunade had taken charge right then and there. She demanded to see the doctor on duty, to see everything on Kakashi's condition. It wasn't long until a nurse had quickly dragged a doctor in. When Tsunade was in her medic mode, you couldn't help but do what the woman demanded. Soon everyone else was kicked out of the room as she went to look on his condition and if possible to heal him. That was where everyone was at this moment, waiting in a hallway for some kind of word. There was a strange silence among the Genin team, but what really was getting to Sakura and Sasuke was just how quiet Naruto was. It was very strange to see the boy so still and quiet, and it was starting to worry them. Sasuke glanced at the boy now and then, but Naruto's face was more of a mask now, even though he wore a mask anyway, than he could ever remember. He did notice that Naruto kept clenching his fists now and then. Jiraiya had gone to the Hokage's room to report in and set things up to make sure that everything would be set up in advance for Tsunade to take over. Sasuke was looking at Naruto and he had no idea what or if he should say something to him. Naruto was a rival that he had ever since the first day they met. Naruto was the only person his own age that actually pushed Sasuke to get better, and it was a rivalry that he had come to enjoy. Every defeat spurred him to improve, every victory felt great, but despite all that the boy had become his friend and Sasuke knew what it was like to lose family. It was a pain that never really went away. It dulled with time, but the wound and scars of that always remained. He didn't want Naruto to know what it was like to lose family, especially since Kakashi was the only family that Naruto had left. Ever since learning about his past, that Naruto had lost his parents without ever knowing them, Sasuke felt a bit bad that he at least had memories of his parents. Kakashi had become the only father that Naruto had known. The young dark-haired boy also didn't want to lose their sensei. It was more than that, Kakashi was the only one that could teach him about the Sharingan, or what else he could learn from the man. The man had become a bit more than a teacher. All those stories of Obito had given him a new look at his clan. He had been the first adult that Sasuke had really started to look up to, and while on Team 7 he felt better about his life. He still wanted to kill his brother, but lately he felt that maybe there might be more to it. For Naruto, he was in own little world, as for the first time he really felt fear in a long time. He had gone through a lot, but not once did he ever think that he might lose his dad. Kakashi had always been there for him. In all the times he needed a dad, Kakashi had been that dad. Helping with homework, making him do homework, actually, making sure he ate more than ramen, but treating him to ramen when Naruto did something good. All those memories rushed through his mind, and he just couldn't see his life without his dad. Kid. Naruto looked to his left to see Anko, Hinata with Kurenai coming quickly over to the group. When word got out that Naruto and the others were back and that they had Tsunade with them at the hospital, Anko had ran straight here. It was pure luck that she ran into Kurenai and Hinata and quickly told them what she heard. She only had slowed down because Hinata would want to come with them, and Kurenai came as well. Anko had been the one that had spoken to Naruto, and the look in his eyes told her that the kid was holding, but he was worried. Well, she knew that all too well. When she heard that Tsunade herself was at the hospital for the first time, she had real hope. Hinata moved to his side, a range of emotions running through her. She was glad that he was back, but she was also worried for him. She sat down next to him, and when she looked into his blue eyes, they weren't as bright as they normally would be. She could see the turmoil he was in, and her heart ached from it. Naruto had always been the stronger one, the one that always was there for her and made her happy. He was always the one that would be cheerful and hopeful, but this was the first time she could remember when she couldn't see any of that in his eyes. Hinata could still remember the day her mother had died. It had been the worst day of her life, and yet Naruto had been there for her. Through all the heartache and pain, he had always been by her side as her best friend. But now they were more than friends, and she wanted to be there for him, to share his pain and help him through what was to come. No matter what, she didn't want Naruto to be alone, so she sat down next to him and without a word gently placed her hand into one of his. Naruto looked into her pale eyes and felt her soft hand in his own. It felt so delicate and soft in his hand as he gently took her warm hand in his own. It felt a lot better to have her here as he waited to see what would happen. Her gentle nature seemed to have a calming presence on him, but the worry was still there. Anko looked at the two and couldn't help but feel a small smile tug at her lips. Despite everything, this little warm moment showed her that relationships had many parts to it, and being there for the other was part of it. Seeing the two young ninjas made her hope that neither of them would go through what she had been going through since Kakashi had been put into the hospital. How long has she been in there? Anko asked the others. Over an hour now, Sakura answered, as every single minute seemed to drag for eternity. It felt like 8 hours by this point for her, as she was deeply worried for their sensei. How did this happen? Sasuke asked, as they hadn't had a chance to ask anyone that question. Anko felt a slow burning anger inside of her, remembering how it happened and how she hadn't been strong enough to help. Kakashi had taken on everything to protect them all, and now he was the one in a hospital. So she started at the beginning about how they had run into two strangers in the village and how it turned out to be Itachi and a partner of his. Sasuke took extreme notice when his brother's name had been said, as a very long rage filled his eyes. It was an old pain and anger that had slowly burned for years, and now it was slowly starting to burn hotter. Anko finished things off by how she wasn't sure what happened, but Kakashi had ended up taking some kind of assault that landed him in a coma, and he had been in there ever since. We still don't know what happened, Kurenai finished, as she had been there. Kakashi told us to keep our eyes closed the entire time it happened. A Sharingan technique, Sasuke spoke up for the first time. It's the only thing I can think of. Do you know what kind? Kurenai didn't know much about Sharingan techniques, not many did outside of the Uchiha clan. Yeah, I have a pretty good idea, Sasuke's jaw clenched remembering the last time he had seen his brother on that bloody day. He had seen those red and black eyes that were unlike any Sharingan he had ever seen before. The next thing he knew he was spending 3 days in hell, living the deaths of his family and clan over and over again in a never-ending torment. Sasuke remembered waking up in the hospital over a month later. It looked like he wasn't going to say anything else to everyone, so they didn't push. They could see the anger written all over the boy's face. "We've been visiting every day," Hinata told Naruto, if only to get rid of the silence that had started to build up. Naruto asked, speaking since he had left the room for the first time. Well, myself, Mateam, Kurenai-sensei, Asuma-sensei and Anko-sensei was here a lot too. Hinata counted off mentally of those she could remember off the top of her head. Anko turned away slightly, if only so no one would see the slight blush on her cheeks. She hated being looked at as soft by others, and now she had everyone looking at her at once. Normally she liked attention just on her terms. What? Anko challenged anyone to say anything to her at the moment. At least the kids had the good graces to know when to avoid her look. Although Anko did look at the closed door to Kakashi's room wondering how things were going, her heart felt like it was hammering in her chest as any moment Tsunade could come out of there with either good or bad news. It was 15 long silent minutes until the door finally opened with Tsunade and Shizune walking out as the blonde woman looked slightly tired but in a good mood. "You got 15 minutes to talk to him, but not more. He needs to recover," and she couldn't finish before Naruto rushed by her into the room, making the woman smile. It felt good to help others again, and to make sure a family stayed together filled her with a great sense of accomplishment. Kakashi groaned, feeling like his entire body was stiff and his head felt like someone dropped a mountain on it. He couldn't remember how he had gotten into the hospital exactly, but as he thought about it, it was slowly coming back to him. He started to remember Itachi and then those 3 days in hell. He remembered Anko being there too, and a slight panic hit him as he tried looking to see if she was in the room. He wasn't sure if that had been a trick or if she had also been pulled into that world. It felt like a nightmare that he had dreamt, but also he felt like it had been so real. His memories blurred from that moment as time while in that world had been stretched and twisted to the point that he couldn't tell how much time had passed. What had seemed like an hour turned out to only be a minute. It sure felt more like months than days. The first thing Kakashi saw when waking up had been a face he hadn't seen since he was a lot younger. Tsunade herself seemed to be back. She gave him a quick check and he complied as best he could, but he felt totally drained. Most likely from not eating solid foods since he had been in a coma for starters, and he didn't even want to think what his body was like having not moved at all in all this time. Soon after Tsunade had left, a small blonde, black and orange blur ran into the room and landed onto his chest. Kakashi nearly had the wind knocked out of him as Naruto collided into his chest. "Dad. Hey there, sorry you had to come back and see me resting like this," Kakashi joked, wrapping an arm around Naruto. It felt good knowing that Naruto was back home and safe. He remembered how Itachi had been after him. He wasn't sure about the full reasons for it, but it wouldn't have been good for Naruto. Naruto pulled himself out, smiling that his dad was okay. "I was worried, Dad." "I know, sorry son." Kakashi placed his hand on the boy's head. "So anything interesting happen on your mission?" He knew that changing the subject would help, and Naruto's eyes lit up as well. "Oh yeah, I learned this really cool new technique," Naruto happily said as he started to go into the whole story. He was interrupted halfway through when Anko pulled him off. She had waited for the father and son reunion, but she couldn't wait anymore. "Hey, what the hell?" Naruto protested. "Tsunade said only 15 minutes, brat," Anko told him. "You can tell him the rest tomorrow. Let some of us have a moment too." "Oh okay." Naruto scratched the back of his head, realizing that Anko would want to talk too. "Okay, I'll be right over tomorrow, Dad." "I'm not going anywhere." Kakashi grinned as Naruto and the others left. Soon it was only Anko and Kakashi there in the room alone. Kakashi looked her over. She seemed a little ragged, but well. It looked like Itachi might have just used an image of her after all. That made him feel better. He could take torture, but the torture of those precious to him was a lot harder, and it was extremely hard to have seen her gone through it. He could still hear her screaming in pain, and although it had been an illusion, it still rang in his ears when thinking on it. Kakashi also started to realize something else. Anko meant a lot to him. He had never felt like this about anyone. she was in his thoughts daily and a face he always looked forward to seeing. Yes, he found her beautiful, but it was more than that, she had an energy about her that made life fun. She walked over to him smiling and he couldn't help but smile in return. "Are you okay?" Kakashi asked and saw some confusion on her face. He wanted to make sure that she hadn't suffered because he hadn't been strong enough to protect her. "With the fight after I went down. Oh, that guy showed up just after, well, whatever Itachi did to you." Enko could see him visibly relax and wondered what he was getting at. Well, whatever it was, she had someone more important to say to him while she had the time. "You know, there's something I need to tell you." "Oh yeah?" Kakashi looked at her intrigued as she leaned in closer. He had to admit that he was glad that it seemed she had never experienced the hell he had gone through, and the thought of her lips was a welcome change. Too bad that he was so occupied with her lips that he didn't notice her fist connecting into his stomach. He forgot how hard she could punch before that moment. He coughed out as he tried to breathe. The next thing he knew, she was thrown over him and he wasn't sure what was going on. "Enko?" he asked carefully. "You idiot," she yelled at him. "Do you have any idea how hard it was seeing you like this and not know if you would ever get better?" She pulled back and for the first time in Kakashi's memory he could see tears in her eyes. Enko never cried, at least he had never seen her cry, not once. Yet here she was, although it wasn't the waterworks you would expect, maybe a couple and that was it, but that was a couple more than he could ever remember. "You dick, I was so worried." She balled her fists and wiping her eyes. She wouldn't cry anymore, she had cried enough as it was and she didn't like it. "Sorry." Kakashi couldn't think of much else to say. He was still surprised that Enko had actually shed tears, and for him no less. "Don't do that to me ever again, you got that?" Enko gave him a steeled look that she meant it. "I know that our lives are dangerous and I know that, but I just need to hear you say it, that you'll never do this to me again." "It's stupid, I know, but..." He managed to reach up and cup her face. "I know, and I'm sorry to worry you. Tell you what, as long as I have you to return to, I'll keep fighting and never give up seeing you again." Although the sentiment was his, he actually took that from one of his books. It was actually one of his favorite lines and he doubted that Enko would know it. Besides, he wasn't sure what he could say to her that would make her feel better, but this whole thing did remind him of one of his favorite scenes. Despite what many thought he was a bit of a closet romantic, which was one of the reasons he read those books, again, one of the reasons. He was actually surprised to see her blush slightly. It was kind of cute seeing her a little more feminine at times like this. She tried to hide it and he wanted to say how cute she looked in that moment, but he got hit once already by her. "Idiot," she whispered out, but his words did make her feel better. She heard a knock on the door as Tsunade's voice telling her that Enko's time was nearly over. She leaned and gently pulled down his mask to give him a gentle but long kiss. She was just so relieved that he was awake and that he would be okay. All this time she had been an emotional wreck, but it did put things into perspective for her and she saw things about herself and her feelings for Kakashi went a lot deeper than she thought. Slowly she pulled away, putting the mask back up. "I love you," she whispered to him and quickly got up and went to the door before he could see how red saying those little words made her face. She had forced herself to admit the truth and now she had finally said the words. She didn't care if he said them back. Well, okay, that was a lie. She did care a bit, but at the moment she wanted to give him time to process that. Kakashi blinked, not sure he heard her correctly. "Wait, Enko, what did you just say?" "Enko. Enko." He called after her, but she closed the door behind her. So there he was, tired, his body streaming for rest and decent food, but all he could think about was what Enko had just said to him. He just stayed awake for hours after that, thinking on it and trying to pin down how he felt about it. By the time he thought through it, he also came up with a plan on how to respond to Enko.